Turn on my mic. This meeting of the Board of Trustees is called to order at 6:07 p.m. We have a quorum with Soltero Ramirez, Richard Cuder, Mike Rosales, Connie Woodruff, and myself, Cruz Ochoa. Trustee Cuder, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silence?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Moment of silence, please. Thank you.
Dr. De La Torre, would you please lead us through the workshop this evening?
President Ochoa, members of the board, esteemed guests, we have two presentations tonight. The first presentation is one that is especially important to our district goals and targets. It's the A to F accountability presentation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Terry Hernandez.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Is that good? All righty. Let's see. All right. Well, as you know, in mid-August, TEA released the 2019 accountability ratings, and our district received an overall rating of a B, which is an increase of 5 points from 2018. And so this evening, I would like to take a few moments to kind of go through each domain and kind of show you how we got there. So if you'll take a look, just kind of a reminder of Domain 1. We are looking for elementaries and middle schools. We are looking at the average star performance for at approaches, meets, and masters. And that would be for all tests, all subjects, all versions, all students. For high schools in the district, you'll see the second diagram, you'll see that we have the CCMR, the College Career Military Readiness component, graduation, and average star performance. So based on the targets here, they're going to take the raw scores and convert them over to scaled scores. So let's see how we did for average star performance, which is 40%. On that one, we had the approaches grade level, meets grade level, masters, with a scaled score of 84. For college, career, and military readiness, you can look at the different indicators. That totaled up to a scaled score of 90. And for graduation rates, you can see the 4-year, 5-year, 6-year rate. They take the better of the three, and that was our 6-year rate at 92.5, which turned out to be a scaled score of 70. With all those components, we have a domain score of an 84, which is a B, and our student achievement domain score increased from 6 points from 2018, so that was quite an accomplishment. So the next slide you're going to see is a review of Domain 2, which is our school progress domain. As you can see for elementaries and middle schools, you're going to see that you have Part A and Part B, so we have student growth on one side. The student growth includes all tests which have a student progress measure. They either meet or maintain performance. And then relative performance is where your average star performance of approaches, meets, and masters versus your eco-DIS populations. So campuses that have similar or almost exact eco-DIS populations are who you're being compared to on Domain 2. For the high schools in the district, it's the relative performance of average star and CCMR versus eco-DIS, and then student growth. So in Domain 2, they're going to take the higher of Part A or Part B. In relative performance, you can see for the star and CCMR indicator, our scaled score was 91. For academic growth, we had the indicators for reading and math gave us a scaled score of 80. That brought us to a combined score of a 91, a scaled score of 91, which was an A, and that was a change of 5 points. It was an increase from 2018, so another great improvement there. On domain 3, closing the gaps, there are 4 different components for the elementary and middle school. You see student growth, which is basically your domain 2. You see English learner progress, and that's we have performance on reading and math at the meets grade level, and we also have the average of approaches, meets, and masters on STAR for our elementary and the middle schools. For the high schools in the district, we have reading and math, and we have the CCMR component, graduation, and TELPAS, which is our progress on our ELs. So if you take a look at our closing the gaps, you can see the different indicators gave us a scaled score of 87. You'll see that we met 100% of indicators for EL progress and school quality. Graduation is something we need to work on. However, we need to keep in mind that the graduation rate is the 4-year federal graduation rate, and the targets are very, very high compared to the other indicators. So with that, our scaled score was an 87, which is a B, and that was a change of 7 points up from 2018, which is a really good increase. So what is our overall rating? We have to take a look. How do we get that rating? We take a look at the better of domain 1 or domain 2, and that is 70% of our ratings. And then domain 3 is 30%. If you take a look at this, you'll see that our overall score was an 89, and that was a B, and it was up 5 points from 2018. This is how we earned our overall score. As you can see, a great majority of our campuses are above average. TEA's goal, as you can see here, is an average campus in Texas, and you can see that we're well above that in the majority of our campuses. Also, for distinction designations that were awarded, 81% of schools received 1 or more distinction designation here at Ysleta. Since we are members of the Texas Urban Council, we thought you might want to see how we performed in comparison to the other districts. We have the highest number of A's at 20%, 27%. We have the highest number of B's, and we have 0 F's. And if you'll also notice that we have 81% of our campuses were eligible for 1 or more distinctions. In comparison to our region, we had the second highest growth, and you can see that we are up 5 points from last year. So based on our accountability scores, these are the campuses that have been identified for interventions. Because of these interventions, we do have to meet the following requirements that you see in the 4th column over, or the 5th column over to the right. If you're looking at this chart from left to right, it kind of goes from the worst to not so bad this way. You can qualify for having an overall score of an F or a D, a domain score of an F or a D, federal interventions, comprehensive, targeted, or additional support as well. And these are the campuses that we have recently met with. The leadership teams on the campuses met with leadership from the district. We got together, they worked on their targeted improvement plans. They were looking at their SIPs and all of their data. We felt like they did a good job of putting together their targeted improvement plans, which were emailed to you earlier. Here you go. The SIPs and the DIP and the TIP are all on the agenda for Wednesday for approval. And the SIPs, DIPs, and TIPs. I know, it's a little bit crazy there. But that's kind of how we're at, where we're at for now. Any questions? Yes.
I just want to make a comment. I want to thank the leadership, Dr. De La Torre, having been here the 4 years, and to see this concentrated effort of improvement, to me is a testament of all your work and all the people that work with you. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that we've done so many other things facility-wise, but ultimately, down here, we're also doing what we're here to do. and that's the preparation of our children. And I commend you, as well as your staff, your administration, and you people out there that are not here today, that are there day in and day out, month in and month out. We certainly appreciate your efforts.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rosales. I don't think that people fully appreciate the accomplishment because as a border community with a lot of the demographics that have historically and traditionally been used as excuses throughout the entire country for why school districts or school systems can't achieve at the level that other demographic groups achieve. When you look at the TUC, the Texas Urban Council of Superintendents, and you start to really think about it and reflect about it, what we've been able to do in this school district with the poorest children, with Latino children, African American children. We don't have a very large population of African American children, but we certainly have a very large population of Latino Hispanic children. Students with special needs and English learners to achieve an 89 and to be positioned to earn an A next year, which is what is on all of our minds. That's the goal next year, is really remarkable and extraordinary. And it's not that I want to cast shade on the other 9 or 10 school districts that make up the Urban Council of Superintendents, whether it's Austin, Aldine, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio. All of those are great school districts with great superintendents doing good things. This school district right here outperformed all of them when it comes to the 8AF accountability. And I give all of the credit to the leadership that starts at the cabinet level, to our profile, I would call it, for principals. We have a very rigorous process. We only select the kind of principal that we think has the energy and the enthusiasm and the belief, the value system that all kids can learn. And then we've got great teachers in the 4 corners of the classroom with support staff and a great recipe that we call our instructional framework that makes it happen. Brenda does amazing things with the elementary schools. I've got Dr. Kennedy taking care of the middle schools. Robert worked hard on the high schools. Rosemary Menchaca's taken that role. We've got a great team, and we're here at your disposal, sir. We're gonna do a phenomenal job for you this year.
So as a follow-up, this morning I was part of a meeting with MASPA. And the reason I bring this thing up is MASPA is on its way up in terms of participation and what have you. And as I've become more into MASPA's challenges, I find that we in this district could probably provide a guiding light for a lot of the people in the rest of the state. And if at all possible, I don't know if we could swing it or not. Our meeting is going to be the 19th and 20th of September. Yes.
Oh, for MASPA?
And the reason I say if we could link up, I think there's a wake-up call that we need to give our membership in terms of what is needed and what is being done in districts like us, because we've got our challenges, but we haven't shied away from them.
So at TASB, we're presenting, and at TUC, the Urban Council, we've got a presentation on how we address English learners and our dual language program. And
see, they're way behind on the dual language thing.
They really are, and they're looking forward to it. They're looking forward to hearing from us how you take a large school district that you know is probably has more facilities than it has students, and how you right-size that and how you communicate with your community to help them understand. And our formula has, in a large part, relied on bonds. That's true. But we've always said we're not doing it for the money. What we're doing is we're closing, consolidating schools, putting them in brand new facilities, and then we're really working hard to upgrade those facilities that require an investment, and being able to make a distinction and a designation between those other facilities where it may not make sense to invest a lot of money. So whether we're a school district of 56,000 students, as we were back in 1987, or a school district of 40,000 students, we want them in the best possible educational environment, rather than having all of these schools spread out all over the city and encumbering resources that could better be redirected to focus on the kids we have. And so we're incredibly proud of a 5-point gain. And I know it's not the highest gain. And I want to congratulate all of the other school districts that had gains. But making a 7-point gain when you're in the low 80s versus making a 5-point gain when you're in the high 80s, we're getting to that point where it gets harder and harder to make that kind of an increase in all of you with your leadership and your support and your work with the associate superintendents. Because we do have I think we have a very unique leadership model in that all of the trustees can work directly with the associate superintendents at the elementary school, middle school, high school level. I don't need to be the hourglass where everything can get clogged up. You go directly to Brenda, you can go directly to Dr. Kennedy, Rosemary Menchaca, Robert, all of them are at your disposal, but they all understand the goal. And we appreciate you, we really do.
Thank you.
I had one quick question. I know that one of the big stumbling blocks for all districts across the region is graduation rates, and looking at our numbers, it still seems like a puzzle that's difficult to kind of figure, also because of how high the standards are. Do we have any plan to kind of increase that, how we plan to achieve that as a district to move that number up? Because it is a very difficult thing to do, and I know that the standards are incredibly high.
They've been somewhat unfair with us, because what they want to make sure that happens is that if you've got, I'll just throw a number out there, if you've got 10,000 ninth graders, all they're looking at is how many of those 10,000 ninth graders graduate 4 years earlier. And I know Robert can probably speak to that, Rosemary Menchaca can speak to that. They're working with our principals to make sure that, first and foremost, we don't get, that there isn't a deficit when students leave us and don't drop out, they just simply select another path. And then the other thing is getting our teachers and our administrators at the high school to code correctly, to make sure that we're keeping track of all of these students. But in my experience, even when I was a high school principal for 7 years, I knew that if I could get a student to get through the 10th grade year and into the 11th grade year, I was going to keep that student. So there are two pivotal points. One is 8th to 9th, where you may lose some students. The other one is at the 10th grade, where mathematically it becomes obvious to them that they're going to have to do so much that mathematically it's very difficult to do. And what we have to do is we have to put programs in place to say, I know it's difficult, everybody develops at a different rate, but even if you're a whole grade level behind at the 10th grade, we've got programs to help you catch up, whether it's summer school or online learning programs to get you there. I know that neighboring school districts go out and knock on doors. I don't know how effective that is. I know that Rosemary's working with our alternative ed programs to bring back a lot of students who have dropped out because their parents, because their family needs them to work, requires them to work. So we're looking at how do we create a flexible program for those students where if you can't come to school in the morning, we're going to provide something for you in the afternoon. If you can't come at all, we're going to try and provide for you something for you online, but doing everything we can to say your life's circumstances shouldn't define how far you go. And that's what really the public school system has become, is you've got to be open, available, nimble, flexible, accessible, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because society's gotten very, very complex and complicated out there. And we got to get there. And I know there's a lot of people out there that say, you know, that's a lot of resources that you're investing in creating all these opportunities for students who sometimes or oftentimes will never come back to you. But every school district in the region is in the business of trying to hold on to the kids and giving them some kind of access so they can get that high school diploma, and hopefully that will motivate them, inspire them to get a 2-year degree, a baccalaureate, or an advanced degree someday. And y'all feel free to tell them.
So I guess philosophically speaking, yes, you notice the 4-year graduation rate, right? And what we've done is we've done a concerted effort of increasing the DLA. And we're more concerned about having them be college ready. Because, you could water down the number of credits to graduate them, and that will spike automatically your 4-year. But if you notice, our 5 and our 6 years climbing. And the other thing I want to point out is that we went from a 47 CCMR last year to a 61 this year, which is almost, 14-point gain. Part of it, like Dr. Latorre said, was coding. But some of it is also we're ensuring that just graduating in 4 years is not the goal. I'd rather you graduate in 5 if you're going to be able to have the certification, the dual credit, that CCMR indicator that's going to help you. Keep in mind also, 40% of your CCMR counts. Graduation, especially the 4-year one, I believe only counts maybe 5 to 10% on the overall grade. So it's kind of like making that decision. Are we more concerned with getting 4-year graduations, or are we concerned about increasing our CCMR and having kids ready after high school? And then the other thing is, as far as some of the programs, we do have No Senior Left Behind, very successful. So we're monitoring students from the get-go, starting now, doing transcript audits. We're already remediating, bringing kids in, and we allow mentorship, and we provide that after school, to ensure that they get the credits. And also at Plato, that's a tough one because it's always credit recovery. However, we don't push for the 22 credits. We still push for 26, even at Plato. Why? 22 credits is not going to get you into EPCC. It's not going to get you to college, so where are you going to go after that? So it's not always just the diploma, but it's the diploma with the extra incentive to be able to go on beyond high school. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So it's philosophically, there's one of those things where, is it just the 4-year graduation, or are we more concerned about college readiness?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I work in that
Yeah,
field,
no,
so
of
I
course.
agree with you completely. We see eye to eye on that.
We got you, okay. I know.
I still would like to have an opportunity to share our at least in a very brief manner, our systems with MASPA.
And I'm sure you all know this, that niche that does the study on all of the different elements of what it means to be a great school district and a great school has rated your school district, ladies and gentlemen, as #1 in El Paso. And that takes into account teachers, administrators, test scores. It looks at it in a very comprehensive way and says, where do you get a great experience in a public school system that isn't a charter school or a parochial private school? And what they've arrived at is, given our circumstances, given our population, given the poverty, given the limited English proficiency, the attraction of special education parents, if you take all that into account, it's the #1 school district in the city. And there's a lot more to it than TEA numbers, although we absolutely respect and embrace the accountability system. When it really comes down to it, what they're basically saying is, if you have a child and you want a great experience in a public school system, the Ysleta Independent School District, the district, is a great place to enroll your children. And that's what we've worked for at least the past 5 years. And I couldn't be prouder. Our athletic programs are great. Our fine arts programs are great. Our building, obviously our bond is coming to a conclusion, and it's exciting to see everything out there. It's just a matter of convincing folks that was chapter 1. Chapter 2 should be right around the corner. And if you give us, you as a board, and the folks that I rely on and are amazing, an opportunity to take the next step, we got you.
Anything else? Okay, so I'm gonna just say that we've done well, and we're going to do even better. But overall, besides numbers and graduation rates and everything, we're investing in the future of this community. I think that Ysleta provides the best opportunity for any student to fulfill the requirements to graduate. And in saying so, it's also helpful for our society because every student that graduates will contribute, will have a potential to contribute to our community. If we let any student not fall through the cracks or not graduate, that in turn hurts in the long run because their earning capacity and everything else would be at a lower level. So I congratulate everybody for striving to get our students through school with all the programs that you just outlined. And I think that's the bottom line for why we're here, is to get all these students and invest in our future. And again, thank you all for all the hard work you put into it, especially our teachers, our groundskeepers, our bus drivers. Everybody contributes to this one goal. And thank you.
Thank you, Terry. The next presentation, I don't know if you've all had a chance to review the audit report. I think Champagne's with us.
No, she's going to be off today.
What? Did you have any questions for Champagne that I could answer? Just trying to
Can
be.
you explain the
Just
risk
trying to be
analysis?
We could also just have it written down in center.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
That could work, I think.
Just trying to be helpful, Connie.
Thank you. Okay.
And then the third item this evening, of course, is the review of our agenda for Wednesday night. And I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. We will now discuss the agenda items as listed in the posted notice of regular meeting of Ysleta ISD Board of Trustees for September 11th, 2019, and related recommended motions with the superintendent and executive cabinet, and receive responses to questions and/or requests for additional information through the superintendent in preparation for deliberation and action on said items as at the September 11, 2019 regular Board of Trustees meeting. It's a lot of ands in there. Okay, consent items. Minutes, the Board of Trustees workshop, August 12, 2019, 6 p.m. Board of Trustees regular meeting, August 19, 2019, 6 p.m. Number 3, monthly financial update as of July 2019. Budget amendments requiring board approval. Approval, number 5, approval of award of YISD contract number 2020038 with the City of El Paso for youth programs.
I have a question about that one. It sounds like such a fabulous program. And I was just wondering how many sponsors will be going along with these kids when they go to this. It's a foreign country, of course, and to me it sounds kind of dangerous. So how many sponsors do we have going?
They'll have to
now?
adhere to our board policies to make sure that the student adult ratio is appropriate. I believe the total number of students that they select is 2 from
3 to 5 is what it said on the
35 from
3 to 5.
from each district or in total?
I thought it was
think it's
total. I thought
no,
it
you're
was
right.
total, but I could
It's
be
total,
wrong.
but as of now, I believe that EPISD has said they're in. We have said they're in. Socorro has not. And they asked if we were going to limit it to the Young Women's Leadership Academy. We said no. Any high school student throughout the entire district to do the exchange, and that we would send the appropriate both supervisors, chaperones, and then some district personnel if we need to.
Okay.
I didn't know we had a sister city in Israel.
I didn't either. And it's kind of funny to me, the one that it is, because I wouldn't have expected it to be Israel. But
I wonder if it's geographically lined up straight across.
I don't
on-
know. I
What?
can't imagine any other matching things. So, but it sounds like a really, really good program. A great
It would be a
opportunity.
nice exchange and an opportunity for
Yeah.
students to really,
And
yes,
then-
oh, you probably have all the answers, don't you?
The information that the city has shared with us is that there would be about 16 El Paso-wide, 16 students. And so there would be 3 to 5 from each participating district. And so perhaps, 4 chaperones for the whole group, something like that.
Where do you sign up?
I want to make a comment. One of my, I think he's a friend of mine or client, but they were in Israel, and I had the same questions. How secure is it? They monitor things on a daily basis. We're talking about the government, so if there's any area that's not secure, they're not going.
Oh, in Israel?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
The
it's
Mossad.
extremely well monitored, so, which is very. I thought it was great. He had a wonderful experience there.
And then we will have children from Israel coming here.
Yes.
That's super cool, too.
Staying at your home.
There you go. Why not? Why not? I miss my kids, so there you go. I could enjoy having some kids around.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, let's see. Item number 6, 2019-2020 District and Campus Improvement Plans and Targeted Improvement Plans. I have a question on these things. I've looked at some of these. It was about 2 years ago that I looked at all of them, the ones that were from my district. And I just wonder who is responsible for or oversee these campus improvement plans?
It's the lady sitting there right behind, Connie Vasquez. It's a state and federal mandate. It's part of those programs. And so every campus who receives federal funds, or any district who receives federal funds, has to have a campus improvement or a district improvement plan. But the lady is right there. We could answer any questions.
Please.
Good afternoon, President Ochoa, Dr. De La Torre, members of the board. I am ready, sir.
Thank you, thank you. On these campus improvement plans, there are several areas that are addressed. Now, how well are they maintained and updated?
What we do, this summer I met with each individual principal, campus principal, one-to-one, to go over their campus improvement plans. We redid the format this summer, so we looked at that, so you'll see a new format once you start looking into it. We took their words, their advice, as far as it was a little bit cumbersome in creating. So we took the format, we redid it. We looked at their parent engagement activities as far as their federal requirements and so forth. So those were addressed as far as the changes with ESA. So it was myself and our parent engagement community coordinator that went to each campus to meet with them. We go over them. My team, our department has been going through them this past 3 weeks. They had a deadline of July 16th, I believe, so we would go ahead and present them to the board in September. So we've been going over them. We've been giving them feedback one-on-one as far as through emails. This is what we found that is in compliance. This is what you still need to work on and so forth. So we give them a week. We go back and double check them to make sure that what they did was in compliance. We have a checklist that we have for each campus on what we're looking at with regards to requirements, whether it's the CNA, their CEIC members, their 2 business members, community members, their 2 parents for the CEIC, the dates, the measure datas, sources that they use to create their CNA, who was involved in creating their CNA and so forth. So we want to make sure that everything that they're addressing is aligned to our district goals, our 3 district goals, and then we look at the objectives, their targets, and then they're responsible for creating their actions. This is what you need to address. How will you address it at your campus? So we look through all of that as far as which students will be affected by their decisions, their strategies, the persons responsible, the funding that will be used to go ahead and make sure that that strategy is being successful. then we're required by law, by federal law, to go ahead and have 3 formatives. We have one in November, we have one in February and April, and then we do the summative at the end of the school year.
That was my next question, is how do you maintain accountability for these plans? And you just said that you have some assessments that are conducted 3 times a year.
Yes, sir.
With these assessments, are there targeted goals also in there?
Yes, sir. What we do, we take accountability as far as what each campus is rated on and what their weaknesses are based on their CNA. And then we make sure that they're addressing those weaknesses as part of their federal requirements and or state requirements. But because we also look at our state comp funding and how is that used to go ahead and close the gaps and make sure that all students are being successful.
And this whole process terminates, well, not terminates, but it culminates in May?
July.
July.
So it runs from July 1st to June 30th. So it's a year round because we also include our summer programs as part of it.
And there was going to be presented to the board sometime? The process? No,
The plans will be up for, they're already on there. There's a link that was shared with you, and you have the district improvement plan, and then we have each campus improvement plan as well in that link. And they'll be out for
So
approval on
us,
Wednesday.
as my District 5, I could go ahead and look at the schools that I have and see what goals they have
Yes,
set for themselves, and then I can track that progress. Let's say in January, I can go back and look at what they've accomplished
sir.
so far. Oh, okay.
All campus improvement plans are available to the public. So
This
it's
is a
on
lot
each of
better
the
than it was
websites as well.
before.
And Mr. Ochoa, if I can add, we also remember in June, or we email you the campus scorecards, the district scorecards, and every campus has a scorecard that is also aligned. So your strategic action plan is also aligned to our SIPs. So if you say 2% in this, that's why you see, that's how we also progress monitor at the end. Are they making the increases we've set? So it's all aligned. So it's all one big systemic program. It's not isolated. So your goals are their goals.
At every school, and our instructional framework is such that the high school principals have an enormous burden. They really are that next layer down that gets to look at all of the schools in that particular learning community and look at the data and determine whether or not there's a bubble or a gap between 3rd and 4th grade, between 6th and 7th grade, and there's nowhere to hide anymore. And you can't hide students anymore. It used to be that if you had, a low number of special ed students or a low number of EL students, that wouldn't necessarily impact the overall performance of a school. You could kind of keep moving forward and give the impression that you were being academically successful. What the state has done is that they basically said every student counts. And so academic achievement, we've always been very, very strong at making sure that students perform academically and approach the standard, meet the standard, and hopefully in increasing cases, master the standard. I think that the biggest challenge for all of our schools is growth. It's the idea that if you get a child and you're a 4th grade teacher, but this child is already reading at the 7th grade level, you as a 4th grade teacher, you're already responsible for making sure that that child goes from the 7th grade to the 8th grade, which is outside your scope of authority historically. And that is what I think our teachers are acclimating to. And that's the idea that whether they're in the bottom quartile or the top quartile, a year spent with you has to equate to a year's worth of growth. And if if you get the benefit of having half of your class, half of your 4th grade class reading at the 7th grade level, you all of a sudden have to figure out how to get half of your class reading at the 8th grade or the 9th grade level. And if the other half happens to be reading at the 2nd grade level, you somehow have to get them to read at the 3rd grade level. And never in the history of the public school system has teaching been so difficult. And then you bring in all of the different demographic, I won't even call them challenges, I'll call them opportunities. limited English proficient, non-English proficient, full English proficient, GT, interested in STEM, special ed, and you have a teacher who's coming in and really has to develop an individual education plan for every child in the room. And this is not to stick, poke a stick in the charter school eye. What they do is they rely on computer programs that kids log on to. They do some kind of a diagnostic, and then the computer is given the responsibility for addressing the child's needs, but they never develop the relationship with the adult in the front of the four corners of the classroom. And for most of us, if we go back and we think about it, we can all name those teachers, those coaches, those principals that had such a great impact on our life. The academic element was important, but certainly the relationship was important, and that's why I think charter schools will never be able to compete with the public school system, because the public school system really is sort of the foundation of democracy, and there are so many other things you learn. I think many other attributes, leadership, how you speak, communicate. I mean, it just goes on. And computers and software programs, as good as they may be, and we rely on some of them, simply cannot replace a teacher.
No further questions. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
answered.
sir.
We're very proud, and if the teachers are out there watching, going from an 84 to an 89 and just having had just one school that kind of fell into the D, kept us from being an A school district with all of the demographics that usually accompany school districts that right now are performing at the C level across the state. And so at the convocation, that was the message. We're going to fix this, and we're going to come back, and we're going to be an A school, but we're not going to be an A school, and this is not, I don't resent this, we're not going to be an A school if we're Highland Park or the Woodlands or one of those areas. You're going to be an A school where you're an urban, poor, multicultural school district, and that's really uncommon. It's unusual.
Thank you. Now-
Adjourned.
No, I'm just kidding. Not yet.
Excuse
we're
me,
gonna-
President Ochoa?
Yes, ma'am.
May I, before we leave consent items, I forgot to advise the board that on the minutes, consent item number 1, there's going to be a correction. Mr. Safi was not at the workshop on August 12th, and so that's a correction to the minutes that we'll hand out tomorrow
Okay.
when they're approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before we get to the policy action items, I want to mention something that, if you notice on how the rationale has been enhanced, and there was discussions that I had with Monica, Ms. Matthewson, and I think I was telling her that us as board members would really like this, because it gives us more detail. Not so much detail, but it's a synopsis of what we're going to be looking at. And it clarifies a lot of things for me, especially me. When I look at these things, and a lot of times if something catches my eye, I will go back and look at the details of this. But I really like the way it's presented to us, yeah, with enough detail for me to understand what it is that we're talking about. So we don't have to take so much time like I'm doing right now. Anyway, let's go on to policy action items. Number 1, policy BBE, local board members' authority. Number 2, BDD, board internal organization attorney. Number 3,
I just had a quick question on this one. So I know that the state law passed that we have to allow public comment with all policy action items. have we come up with how that's going to be adjusted now from our citizens' input?
Ms. Austin?
No,
No,
I was
no,
just
no, no.
asking because of the new state
He's asking
law
a question.
that allows public comment during all action items. I think it was posted agenda items. Do we know how we're going to adjust our board meetings to allow that?
So that's on policy number
Number three, yes.
Three. I'm sorry, I thought we were at two.
No, it's okay.
Number 3.
Well, that's what trustee Ramirez and I were just talking about. So, TASB has not given a local policy suggestion, but TASB Legal did advise us in the summer legislative session that the board could put reasonable limits on the meeting and on the comment time. And that's what I have done here, and I have talked with Mr. Safi about this. Trustee Ramirez has different information from a session that he went to, so I'd like to get some clarification about that and can email back to you if that's all right, President Ochoa. The question is whether we can limit one person who's speaking on multiple items. Can we limit the time of one person on multiple items? But really, these are just suggestions for you all. If you want to suggest other timelines, other total time limits, you are welcome to do that. This was just to get the ball rolling. You can also put it in place for right now until TASB perhaps does come out with some, that's not clear whether TASB was going to come out with a policy, but I think even if TASB comes out with a policy, it's going to come out and let you fill in the numbers. How many minutes you want to devote to this, how many, if you want to put any time limitations per person. Right now, what this is proposing is that that it shouldn't run longer than 60 minutes for all of citizen input. It can, if you have 80 people or 100 people, it will run longer than 60 minutes because no one will have fewer than 1 minute to speak. Every single person, if there's 200 people, it will run for 200 minutes, or you could have another meeting, but somehow you've got to allow everyone the opportunity to speak. But I think that situation is going to be obviously the rare meeting where you run over 60 minutes.
To clarify, I thought, and maybe I read the law wrong, but I thought that now you couldn't just say it's only during citizens' input, but they could come up during any action item and actually be able to speak. Is that correct? And since we have a meeting Wednesday, I just kind of want to know, okay, well, how's our policy going to be on Wednesday so that we know?
I have the bill here, which I can pull, but TASB expressly advised us that we can still limit it to the start of the meeting. It doesn't have to be interjected throughout the meeting. We do not have to have any kind of dialogue. It can still all be at the front, but for example, if I signed up to speak generally on the bond, and then I wanted to speak on agenda item 1, 3, 5, and 7, I would get to speak on all of those items. What we do right now is if I wanted to speak on all those items, I would be limited to 3 minutes. That's under the current policy. Under the revised policy, I would get to have a total of 6 minutes for all of those items. And if I needed translation, it would be 12 minutes.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you.
Number 4, policy BJCD, local superintendent evaluation. You walked out. Number 5, policy CI, local school properties disposal. Number 6, policy CO, local food and nutrition management. Number 7, policy COA, local food and nutrition management procurement. Number 8, policy COB, local food and nutrition management, free and reduced price meals. Number 9, CRB Local Insurance and Annuities Management Liability Insurance. Number 10, EHBAF Local Special Education Video/Audio Monitoring. And number 11, Policy FNF Local Student Rights and Responsibilities Investigations and Searches. Okay. Action items. Number 1, donation to Hanks High School. Number 2, designation of replacement trustee to represent district on El Paso Central Appraisal District CAD Board. Number 3, request to the Texas Education Agency for class size waivers.
I have a question on that. How many, can somebody walk me through how many classes and all that good stuff like that?
We have 12 campuses, 9 that are going to be over by 1, 4 that are going to be over by 3, and 3 campuses that are going to be over by 2.
Okay, and we're using a ratio of?
22 to 1. They won't go over 25 to 1, and at any point, if the teacher does see fit that they need assistance, we'll have a substitute in the classroom along with them.
Okay, yesterday, while at grocery shopping, I had a teacher stop me and told me that she has 30 to 1 at her school.
Do you know what grade level?
It was elementary.
Okay, because only 5th and 6th grade can go above the 22 to 1. If there is a 5th or 6th grade that is at 30, I'd be curious as to who it is because we generally staff at 24.
I'll give you the name of the
Okay.
school after the meeting.
Perfect, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question to add to that. What grade levels are we talking to about these class sizes waivers for?
K through 4.
No, but yeah, which ones?
I'm sorry?
Right now, you named that some of them are 1 over
Uh-huh.
the 22. Which ones are those?
Sure.
Grade levels.
Dolphin Terrace, Edgemere, LeBaron, North Loop, Parkland, Pebble Hills, South Loop, and Tierra have classrooms over by 1.
And the 3?
The 3, Constance Holbert has a 4th grade monolingual. North Star has a 2nd grade mono. Ariel has a 3rd grade mono over by 3, and Tierra has a 1st grade dual over by 3.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Number 4, board resolution regarding the use of 2019 bonds proceeds.
I'm just going to speak up on this because it is important to me. We have scheduled a meeting, a workshop for Tuesday. I do have a problem with voting on this before we have our workshop. That's just me personally. I think that I would like as the board to be able to have the chance to discuss and share their feelings. I know that there's some board members that feel strongly about the bond and some that have some worries and concerns. And I think that if we're going to be successful in this, I think that we as a group need to be unified and have at least everybody heard. And so that's just my idea, that voting to approve something before we even have a workshop is something that I worry about.
And I completely understand that, and I'm getting the impression that there's a general belief, and it's true, that the board can amend, modify, change those projects outlined in the bond as presented by the Facility Advisory Committee. The catch-22 is if the board requires additional time, whether it be September 17th or September 17th becomes September 24th, we cannot go out and present our interest to the public, whether it be information or should there be some kind of a political action committee out there without the board having arrived at a resolution that at the very least, safety, security, climate in the classrooms or the learning environment and the 5 projects are at minimum guaranteed by the bond as outlined by the Facility Action Committee. So if we go back and we revisit everything and the board wants the latitude, and they certainly have the right to have the latitude and the liberty to completely change the bond program, we can go through that process. But if it takes until the end of September to culminate that, to come to some kind of an agreement by the board as to what the what the essential structure of the bond is, whether it be in general terms or whether it be as specific as some trustees have indicated they wish it to read, 30 days will make it very difficult to go out and articulate and present a bond to a community and result in support. So it's a very, you can do it.
And I think maybe it was misunderstood. I'm not by any means trying to throw away what the facility committees. I just wanted every trustee to understand what it is that was approved, what it is that we're going to be advocating for, because if we have to be out with our public and asking them to support this, I want all trustees to feel comfortable understanding. By no means, and I'm trying to say, let's get rid of what the advisory committee is trying to do. I just want them to be able to speak eloquently and purposefully about what the bond is actually asking for and what it's going to accomplish. And so a full understanding of that is something that I would like the trustees to be able to have if we're being asked to advocate it to our communities.
And the resolution speaks directly to that. It's safety, security, the learning environment relative to the heating and air, and then, of course, the 5 projects. And it doesn't mean that down the road, as we get a chance to discuss it in greater detail, and not so much the projects, but in looking at some considerations that I'd like to present to the board on the 17th. But if we wait until the 17th or after the 17th, it's going to put us in a very, I think, difficult situation, both as a district and as a potential committee out there, because we can't go out and start talking about it until you all arrived at the idea that at the very least there are really 3 elements. One is that this school district prioritizes above everything safety and security, and that speaks to the perimeter fencing, the surveillance cameras, the special glass, the safety vestibules, and all of that at all of the schools that we plan to support into the future. And I say that we plan to support into the future because we may not plan to support all schools into the future. It may not make sense to make that kind of an investment in all 60 schools that currently exist. The second element, of course, is the refrigerated air. And again, it's the same thing. We want refrigerated air district-wide, but there are some schools where we may have to take a step back as a board and discuss whether or not you see a long-term future for that school, or whether it would make more sense to redirect monies from that school to a school that will have a greater enrollment or capacity and that has a facility condition index that supports making the investment. And the third thing is really sort of been flipped on its head, because in the 2015 bond, we promoted the idea of the Ysleta Fine Arts Facility, the combination school at Del Valle, the new Eastwood High School, Parkland High School, Bel Air Middle School. We were really excited about the new projects. Given what's happening in society today, safety, the learning environment, the projects kind of fall to the end, and there are 5 of them. There are 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and a high school. If we're going to change any of those 5 projects, then we need to do that before we go out. There is a lot of, I think, there's a lot of gray area when it comes to refrigerated air, and there's a lot of gray area that comes with safety and security based on what we plan for those schools in the future. But under all circumstances, neither the district or a potential political action committee can go out and begin to promote the measure without the board at least agreeing to some fundamental interests, without basically saying that we can't deviate from that. And so I think what would be important for the board would be, is it the 5 projects that you don't agree with? Is it the investment in the refrigerated air, that's $134 million, or is it the $20+ million in the safety and security measures? In which of those 3 elements is the board struggling with and wants greater clarity so that we can get that to you?
Well, I'm not as eloquent as you are, Dr. Latorre, but I'm just going to cut through the chase. In my opinion, I can only speak for myself, the reason why I chose to go that route is simply because I felt that we have, for the last 4 years, have been talking about consolidation, excuse me, and in terms of 12 or 13 schools that we're expanding about $1 million per school. And I feel that, and again, this is me, feel that when this thing was brought to the person that ran the show, so to speak, I think we left that there, and then we, from that point, the other things came about, which are equally as important. I'm not denying that one is not as important, but I look at it from the standpoint of, we have 12 schools that are costing $1 million, of which we could consolidate maybe 2 or 3, and create a Thomas Manor environment, so to speak, and that would address some of the concerns from the Ysleta area, because there's nothing being done there. Yes, there has been, but that's a perception that people have, and that is that's my perception of what I thought would happen, but it didn't happen. But now for me to wait, we cannot afford to wait. This, and I say this, what has happened in the past 10 or 15 or 20 years, we're catching up. We're barely trying to catch up. So, because things weren't done correctly, the items that are put out before us are so important that I feel that the next time around, we need to make sure that we address the things that we truly have been discussing that are important to us. So from that perspective, I would say let's move on forward and take what we have and provide those facilities for our children.
I think so too, and using Ysleta as an example, Ysleta's had a great deal of investment over the last 20 years, and like anyone else, people always want to know, what have you done for me lately? But the reality is that Ysleta High School's received a huge investment. It's one of the most attractive schools. It recently received the Fine Arts. The one area where I thought we might be able to make an impact was at Paso Dale Elementary School or at Ysleta Middle School. But one of the things that we're going to have to discuss as a governance is the fact that Ysleta will soon be the only, really the only learning community that has 2 separate and distinct middle schools, a brand new Rio Bravo Middle School, and then of course Ysleta Middle School. And I think we invested, I want to say $14 million in Ysleta Middle School just this last year, and enhanced the fine arts facilities. We are looking at the consolidation of South Loop and Capistrano and investing more than the original $7 million that we had planned to make sure that they have a great learning environment. Del Valle is another example with the 2 kitchen cafeterias. We've got Lancaster, LeBaron Park Elementary School, both that have capacity. Del Valle High School is the newest high school, and it was recently painted and remodernized, and it's a beautiful high school, and it's doing great things. And sometimes it comes down to, there's a confusion out there as to what is equity and what is equality. And equity and equality are 2 different things. Equality would mean that we'd go out for a bond and let's just for giggles say that we want $700 million, and we'd like to give each of the 7 learning communities $100 million each. That's not the way this bond's driven by need, and basically, whether it's VLK or Jacobs or anyone else that's going to come in and do an assessment, they're going to have an opinion, and the reality is that Eastwood High School was in great need of almost a complete remodernization, rebuild, but right on its heels was Bel Air High School that was also in that situation. I get questions about Riverside High School. Yes, Riverside High School one day will have its turn, but let's keep in mind that Riverside High School is a facility that can accommodate over 2,000 students, and we have 1,000 students there. So we have to take all of these variables and come up with a plan that I think is going to be presented to you all on the 17th that has less to do with the bond and more to do with, are we ready to consider redrawing attendance lines and redirecting students and reducing our footprint from about 60 schools to about 55 schools in the next 5 years? And that's the work. That's the hard work, and we want to be very, very thoughtful and deliberate and intentional when we do it. But if it's about making sure that we have the resources for compensation and health and welfare benefits and facilities and all of the great programs that we offer that other districts don't offer, like the fine arts program, we're going to have to be that granular in how we spend our money. And so I think the resolution, all the resolution is really intended to do is say, we appreciate, we accept, and we agree with the Facility Advisory Committee that these things are needed. We still, for the next 4 years, 5 years, have the discretion as the board to adjust it as we go. But without that resolution, we can't get out there and start educating. And I got to get out to 60 campuses, any number of neighborhood associations, Chamber of Commerce, the Times, all of the people that you all have gone out and spoke to, and at least give them the big bones. And then we can come back and we can figure out the small bones. I know Del Valle would like to have a theater. I know that we might want a land bank in Parkland. Parkland's probably one of the only areas where there might be a lot of potential growth, so we may want to buy some land. I know that Eastwood would love to see a new Scottsdale, and they'd like to see improvements at Edgemere, and we can do all of that as long as we stay within the 3 themes of safety and security, an improved learning environment, which is really HVAC and all of that, roofing, and then the third is, can we buy into these 5 projects? We didn't get a performing arts center, we didn't get an aquatic center, we didn't get a lot of things that we would have liked, but we're also right at about $400 million, which is right where we were last time. We're not that district that keeps getting higher and higher and higher. And the recent events and kind of the way society's rolling out, we have no choice. We got to protect these kids and these teachers. But we can't get started doing any of that without this board saying, at the very least, these are the bones. Let us hash it out over the next 2-3 years. Let us figure it out. And it can't be figured out without you, because you 7 are the only ones that have the authority to redirect spending or direct spending. Nothing gets bought or paid for without the board. This is not an administrative decision.
Any other? No? Yes. Okay.
One of the things that I'm especially appreciative of the leadership, district leadership, not only the board, but yourself, is that when we did the last bond issue, we did everything as we promised. And we had a whole lot of people that didn't trust us the first time around and said no. Second time around, they said yes.
Yes, sir.
And I was one of those that went and knocked on doors and told them, I know we haven't earned your trust. Please give us a chance, and we will do things right. And if we don't do things right, I'll stand in front of a crowd and I will tell you, we're messing this up, and take responsibility for that. I think we did that incredibly well. I think that speaks about us as a district and the leadership. I don't have a problem with the big projects. I do have a little bit of a problem with the safety and security, not because I don't believe it needs to be done. It does need to be done, and it needs to be done quickly, you know. And you know, and I'm going to meet with a group of parents tomorrow and get beat up on safety and security, which is fine. That's my job. But you know, the governor, and in his wisdom, is going to come out with safety and security recommendations, or what constitutes a safe school. I'm not sure how he's going to come to that, but that's one of his recommendations. I know it's forthcoming. And so I'm a little concerned about that. What's going to happen when all of a sudden we have to do something special, you know? Are we going to have to go out and buy bulletproof glass for the fronts of our schools, or are we going to have to do this or that? I don't know, and I'm not trying to be a scaremonger.
No, I understand.
I'm just saying, we don't know. And so that worries me, is that how, are we going to have enough money to do that? And then the other thing too, and you touched on it, and I think that's only fair, is that we've got to make some hard decisions, and I don't think we have 5 years to do that, you know. I really don't think we have 5 years to do that. I think we need to move on some of these things quickly, and that includes our schools performing. We will not close a school to move kids into a failing school. I know I have your agreement on that, and I will fight you to that all day long, okay? So that's number one. But number two is that if we have this big pile of money, and I know you said you could point out, and Trustee Ysleta has been very helpful in providing us some information about where this big pile of money is for HVAC and other things like that, and designations. I think we have a responsibility to tell folks where we're going to spend the money at, you know, and let them make the decision whether they want to support this or not, okay?
But the big pile of money, are you referring to the 2015 bond?
No, I'm talking about the new one, the 100 and whatever that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what I'm just talking about. So that way, we don't just tell them we're going to do HVAC for schools. If we are not going to keep a particular school open, perhaps like a South Loop, it makes no sense to put refrigerated air in that school. It makes no sense to upgrade the HVAC system. Okay, but I think that in my mind, okay, this is my perception, is that if we're not very specific about what we're doing, then we've deviated somewhat from what we did for the 2015 bond. And I want to be able to tell our citizens out there when they're making their decision, you know, to vote to support this or not, is that this is what your community's getting. This is what you're getting, okay? And barring all the other discussion, okay, just vote for it, you know? And as all of us know at this table, for the last 3 weeks, our parents have been very unhappy, actually the last 4 weeks, about the conditions of the, you know, the air conditioning in the schools. It's been incredibly hot. It's been incredibly uncomfortable. And so we need to do something about that, but they have a right to know. And so I guess that's my thought. Don't want to delay the bond. I don't want to delay moving forward. And your points are well taken about a PAC and having to go out there. And you're right. That's one of the reasons we were successful is you went to all our schools. You got beat up an awful lot over a bond issue. We're having those discussions within the community from different learning communities right now, how people feel about things. And so I think that's the only thing, my only concern. If you wanted to, and I don't know if you're comfortable with it, and I understand what you're saying, if you wanted to, like I said, I don't want to hold this up, but after we have our discussion on, was it Tuesday night next week? Could we not have a formal meeting with one agenda item? And we vote yes or no? That's just my thought. But again, the big projects are a done deal. Safety and security, I'm going to be kind of curious to see what the state's going to mandate and TEA is going to mandate. The other, I call a pile of money. People have a right to know where it's going and how we're going to spend it. I don't want us to be, I just got elected in May. I don't want us to be 4 years down the road where you guys made changes, you guys made promises, and you didn't keep them. I don't ever want us to be that district, and we're not that district. We did things right the first time.
And the one thing I will say is that I don't want to give the impression that as a district, we're not already far out ahead of everybody else. And so the reason that it's hard to define a template that's going to go across what amounts to 100 years worth of schools is because every school will be different, and we've had an audit done, and some schools already have the safety vestibules, some schools already have the double pane glass, but we have to address those schools that have a single pane glass. Some of those are the schools that we're actually going to recommend that we close sometime in the future. Perimeter fencing, the surveillance cameras, we've been, I think, a pioneer in that area in this school district. The one area that will always be, I guess, an Achilles heel is that you'll always have people out there wondering why we rely on security, and some of our neighboring districts have law enforcement departments that cost 2-3 times more than ours do. But if you look at the data, the results at the end of the year when it comes to critical incidents are pretty even. So I'm not sure having someone with a sidearm is making that big of difference. And then once you go there, of course, you can never retreat from that, because the next time there's an incident, it will be because you may have retreated from law enforcement. But I stand by our security people and the surveillance cameras. Like I said, the challenge is, of course, you have 100 years span worth of different schools with different blueprints and different glass and different materials, so you have to treat them all somewhat differently. I think that this year was unusually hot because the students that, and Lindley, Jimmy, all of those folks, I can't say enough about them. They met with those parents, and those parents were sometimes, make sure I say this right, passionate. Beautiful. Were very passionate about how they felt, but the school wasn't all that different than it was in previous years, other than it was a lot like Camino Real and Valley View, who also had an entire wing or wings closed off, and refrigerated air is not available. And we get through, as we have in the past, the 2-3 weeks in August and September, things cool down, and then tempers cool down. But we have to take that as a lesson, and we have to really look at the fact that sooner or later, Alicia Chacon will be a Camino and a Valley View, and someday Hillcrest and Indian Ridge may succumb to the same cinder block, not going to make it. And so one of the things that I've always really, I think, appreciated about the people that we work with, by we I mean me and the board, is that we have the innate ability to look around the corner and see what's coming. And we're fiscally responsible, and we want to make sure we're not dropping millions of dollars in a building, in a structure that we know 8 years from now we're going to be coming back and revisiting as a potential closure. So we have some ideas, we'd love to share them with you, but as far as, the bond goes, I think the three things are, our kids need to be safe, and I think that the bond does that, and I think there's enough flexibility for the board to be able to go project by project and say, what does a safe and secure environment look like at Parkland Elementary School? Well, Parkland Elementary School is a relatively new school. Here's what it looks like. Here's the footprint. It's got perimeter fencing. It's got the safety scanner with the camera. This school will only cost us, $18,000 to $20,000. You move that down there and you apply it to North Loop, it's different. You move it over to Constance, it's different, and come up with something. But in general, the board agrees that whatever it takes to have equity in terms of safety for all children in our schools. Now, elementary schools, really, it's easy. Easier, the easiest. You start getting to middle schools, and then you go to high schools, and it's like herding cats. I mean, it's porous. They're coming in from everywhere, so we need to rethink that. With refrigerated air, I think Ms. Leeper and Mr. O'Neill, when he was here, and the rest of us, were trying to be very fiscally responsible in that if a school had a brand new roof, even if we had the resources, did it really make sense to go in there and tear up a brand new roof and spend $2 million plus the refrigerated air? I think given what's happened recently, if they'll pass this bond, we have to be willing to go in, and no matter how old or how new the roof is, create a priority list and go in and start putting refrigerated air in all of our schools. Now, you'd have to understand that some of our schools have absolutely no crawl space in the, there's no ceiling attic. So it's gonna have to come in from the side. People are gonna have to get creative. And then when it comes to the 5 schools, the 5 schools is part of what you said and what we've talked about, and that is consolidating and going from a footprint of 60 schools down to, 60 schools to 55 schools. If everything we have planned moves forward, and that would include South Loop, Marion Manor, Constance and North Loop, Indian Ridge and Desert View, and there's one more. Yeah, and Hacienda and Del Norte Heights, which we may have to suspend until the next round because I can't give them a new school. And we've always really felt like if we're gonna do this, we'll try to get you a new school. I know that Del Valle Sale, I know that Ysleta, we really need to rethink the middle school configuration. Riverside, we'll get a brand new elementary school, but it doesn't do anything for the middle school that seems to be in need of some repairs. Bel Air will take care of the high school. They've got the middle school. The Del Norte Hacienda Heights is something that we can talk about. I don't think I want to mess with Loma and Mesa Vista. Both Eastwood and Hanks schools are impacted. The only thing you could really do at Hanks is you could retreat from the current 7-8 and go 6-7-8 and create some capacity at the elementary schools. And then Parkland with the new Dolphin Terrace and rolling in the pre-K program at Parkland would give Parkland High School more capacity to expand if we wanted to do that. Which is one of the things that with the Facility Advisory Committee and people that say that somebody already had a vision, you're darn right they did. It's right here. I get it, but they ultimately have to decide whether or not it matches or aligns with their vision. We all know what has to happen. It's just a matter of involving our community and reminding them that the schools actually belong to them. But if we can get a resolution passed to say at the very least we're going to do this, and please understand, and Susan can put language in there that says, and please understand that at any time the board has the latitude and the authority to deviate from this based on current circumstances or need, it would be a great advantage to us to get out there and get literature out there and start getting out there and talking about it.
I appreciate your comments about the community owning those schools. And I can tell you, I did a school visit. Actually, I went to an event Friday morning, Grandparents' Day breakfast. And I had several parents tell me, what do we need to do? Because people are scared. What do we need to do to have armed security at every one of our schools? And one of the grandfathers, who's a very strong Second Amendment type person, he made it very clear. We need armed security at all our schools, including the elementary. And I told him, okay, sir. I said, are you going to come out and talk to the board? He says, absolutely. I'll bring a crowd. I said, please do. And I said, do you realize that this is going to be a huge investment for us? But I was looking at it from the grandparents' point of view. And let me tell you, it was an interesting discussion because when it was all over, I told the gentleman in particular, this one gentleman, I told him, I said, I agree with 9 out of 10 things you just said. And he was surprised. And I said, what are we willing to spend? What are we willing to do? And what are the trade-offs? And so I think there's some real challenges there. And I think as we get closer to budgeting, I think there's some things that we're going to have to address as well.
Although I will say that Columbine and Parkland and some of the big events in our country did have armed security and law enforcement officers as part of staff. And one of the consultants that we worked with that Robert's spoken to is a colonel who was here at Fort Bliss and who simply said it was matter of fact. He said, you all have a few seconds to think about it. The person that's going to perpetuate this atrocity has probably been sitting in front of that school for 3 or 4 weeks. He sees who comes, who goes, where they come, where they go, what time they get there, who leaves, whether they're armed or not. He or she have a great advantage on the school because oftentimes they just position themselves and they just watch. watch for weeks and weeks. And all of us have patterns, you know. I know what time Bobby gets here. It's somewhere around like 9:30, 10. I'm just kidding. I was just seeing if you were listening. No, but there's sort of patterns, right? And I will say that about Bobby's arrival time. I know. But and I think Susan can probably bring greater light on it. The resolution is just to let you know where the resolution really works, and I'll use the city as an example. Just kidding. It doesn't let people, so let's say you all arrive on this great plan, and this is what should happen in the next 5 years, but elections happen and new folks come in. It reminds the public that that's not what these folks here made a commitment to do. Whether they had differences or weren't exactly on everything, so that if, God forbid, you know, someone, you know, 2 or 3 other people come in and all of a sudden they don't think you need a new Scottsdale. You know, they don't think air conditioning is all that much or that important, because when they went to school, they got through it. And all of a sudden, there's either money being redirected somewhere else, and then before you know it, there's not enough money to do the things that the voters in November would be voting for. The resolution says, as far as these 7 members of the board, these are the 3 themes. We may not all agree exactly on what they should look like, but we agree that these are the 3 next steps, or the 3 areas that as a district, who is never going to be a district with 56,000 students, but will be a great district with 42,000 students, and it won't have 65 schools, but it'll have 52 schools, will be a great district. And we'll plateau there, and we'll keep doing what we've done, but we need something to anchor our message to, because we can't go out there with the message and then come back and say, yeah, we were under the impression that we were going to go there. We're not going to do that anymore, or that. Instead, we're going to do this. And then once that happens, we're going like this. But think about it and communicate with us. You all know you have access to every one of these geniuses that I work with, and consider it. And once we get there, and it's going to be tough anyway. It's going to be tough anyway in this economy and with everything going on. It's not going to be an easy bond. But I'd rather not make it harder on us. I'd rather kind of work out the details later as we're doing the timeline.
Any further discussion? All right. Where were we? Okay. Number 5, approval of award of solicitation, number BD 19-02-RFQ, Architectural and Engineering Services for Bel Air High School. Number 6, approval of award of solicitation, number BD 19-02-RFQ, Architectural and Engineering Services for Hanks Middle School. Close executive meeting. Number 1, 2018-2019 Internal Auditor Summative Evaluation. Number 2, discussion with legal counsel related to Rate 41 Group Intervention and Public Utility Commission of Texas, PUC, proceedings related to the sale, transfer, or merger of El Paso Electric Company.
Excuse
That's
me,
it.
President Ochoa? I just wanted to say the yellow sheets are the correct attachments to the Rate 41 Group action item. The one in your board book is not the right interlocal, but these are the right documents.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any adjournment?